So, good morning or good afternoon, everybody. My name is Diane Berard. I'm the social finance reporter for Future of Good, and I'm with MP Ryan Turnbull.
Hi,
Good
everyone. How are
morning.
you?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm very good, doing fantastic today.
So, this conversation is a prelude to the Social Finance Forum that is set to happen June 12 and 13. And I'm very excited to discuss with you, Ryan, because I know you've been instrumental to bringing social finance forefront at Parliament. So today we'll get some update on the Social Finance Fund and the Social Finance Fund and the Social Finance Universe. So first, let's go with a little vision. What is your vision for the Social Finance Fund?
Thanks, Diane. It's great to be here. We envision a future where organizations and projects that support communities in tackling social, economic, and environmental challenges have equitable, affordable, and flexible access to capital, and a future in which diverse social finance intermediaries and social purpose organizations, as we call them today, are able to grow, innovate, and enhance their social and environmental impacts. We know that that's good for society. It's within the community benefit. And, that's really what the Social Finance Fund is about. The Social Finance Fund is bringing together public and private funding to build a thriving, sustainable social finance ecosystem in Canada, which is so exciting to see happening. We're challenging bias and tackling the barriers faced by equity deserving groups. Investments have already started, which is just fantastic news. And we're seeing more money starting to flow to those intermediaries supporting mission-driven organizations, but also we expect increasing support in the coming years towards emerging intermediaries, including those that are led and or serving equity deserving groups, which is fantastic news, and it's baked right in to the Social Finance Fund. Through the life of the program and beyond, we'll see even more being invested into organizations that are working to resolve Canada's most pressing issues, ones that we all know about: housing affordability, food insecurity, social equity, clean energy, climate action, and there's so many more. And at the end of the 16-year fund or program, the social finance ecosystem in Canada will be more diverse, robust, and responsive, and it will have more tools for the continued growth of a thriving and self-sustaining marketplace, which is really the objective here, is to look long-term.
And just to let's dig deeper. So this is a 2-for-1 initiative. So for every dollar that the government put in, the intermediary have to raise $2. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
So you can view this as catalytic capital. So you want to accelerate the money that's put into social finance.
Yeah, I think our government is de-risking capital, and we're doing a lot more of that today. And I've been pushing that on Parliament Hill, and I think our government is seeing the light on how to do this. And the Social Finance Fund is a fantastic example of us doing that and thinking long-term about it and how this can be sustainable in the long term.
Let's talk about the purpose. So what gaps are you filling? Like you said this a bit in the first answer, but let's be more precise. What are the gaps that this fund is filling?
Well, we know that the current social finance market in Canada is relatively young and small, perhaps with the exception of Quebec, which is further along, having done this work for many years, so serving as a really great example. Through the Social Finance Fund, we're aiming to accelerate the growth of the market. We're injecting a total of $2 billion in public and private capital over approximately 10 years. And this will help overcome the lack of a long-standing track record in the market, de-risking social finance for future investors. This is intended to help the market operate sustainably at scale upon completion of the program. Now, we know that a mature social finance market will offer social purpose organizations other financing tools and support them as they seek to scale activities and ultimately really the impact that they're all seeking, that we all want to see happen. So the Social Finance Fund also aims to reduce barriers. So there's barriers that have been long standing for social purpose organizations and social finance intermediaries to access capital, and we want to tackle those barriers. Some of those barriers, right, include, the program is sort of seeking to address those by, improving or addressing the lack of representation of equity deserving groups. That's a really important piece of this. That's baked right into the design. Also, the lack of consistency in impact measurement. Many organizations have struggled with having the capacity to do that and to do it in a way that we can aggregate data, which is really important, and disaggregate data. But also the lack of affordability and flexibility of capital. That's another major gap that this initiative obviously is aiming to address. Fund managers are engaging with the ecosystem to identify more gaps and the needs, and we're building the investment strategies along with them to directly address those gaps and needs. And they're working together to develop the tools that will allow them to analyze their results and adjust their investment strategies to reach more diverse communities and achieve better outcomes and objectives. So we're also working with those fund managers and subject matter experts to establish an effective standard for measuring the impact of social finance investments. So there's lots of work on that front, which we really believe is important, especially for the sustainability of the market. Working with stakeholders, we're building the tools and will support the ecosystem by capturing the data necessary to reduce perceived risk and attract even more capital in the future. So we see that as a real enabler of success, is to make sure that we have good, strong impact measurement built in.
And let me take you to a little trip to the future. So let's imagine we're in 2037. What does the landscape look like? What had the fund accomplished? How will people describe the difference it made? Like, it was like that, now it's like that. Let's do that trip together.
Yeah, thanks. It's very exciting to think about that future for me, because that's a future I've been living into for a number of years, and I think many of us can say that are really truly invested in the social finance work in Canada and social innovation in general. There's so much potential to unlock capital and social finance in Canada. We really envision a future where the social finance marketplace supports our most innovative efforts to improve the health and well-being of Canadians, and that includes a whole host of issues. It's really our toughest social and environmental and economic issues that we're talking about tackling, and I think that those issues will change and dramatically reduce themselves as a result of the social finance market being further developed. We'll tap into impact-based financial opportunities by working to develop tools that organizations need to measure and report on how their projects really contribute to that sustainable development or increase social equity or improvements to many of the issues that we all care about. We'll see more capital. So it's more capital, more flexibility, more affordability in social finance. We'll see more growth in terms of mission-driven organizations that are led by equity-deserving communities or serving diverse communities. We'll see more equitable access to that capital. We'll see greater variety, more innovation. It's really exciting to think about, actually, when you think about how many more social enterprises will be operating at scale. That's how I started out with social enterprise development, and I can't imagine just some of the profoundly impactful social enterprises that I've had the opportunity to work with. Seeing them elevate their impact at scale will just be remarkable. And I think, 16 years down the road, seeing what's possible then, I think it'll be night and day compared to what we see today. There's so many organizations that are out there. Luma Medical is just one who's adding a pharmacy as a new enterprise to their Indigenous-centered health services. There's many affordable housing initiatives that I could speak to, but I think as well as I do, and I'm sure many of our people attending today will already have lots of examples in mind that they can envision that would be great to see be able to scale their impact. I think the last thing I'll say is fund managers have already begun investing, which I think is important to note. And the funds are already starting to address action on climate change, housing availability and affordability, food security, and improving outcomes in Indigenous communities. I think the sky is really the limit, and for what social finance can accomplish. And so I think we should all imagine that together. I don't want it to be about my vision. It's really about a shared collective vision for all of us. And I think it's what kind of a country, what kind of economy do we want to build? What kind of fairness do we envision embedded in our economy in the future? And that's what inspires me most.
Personally, my hope is that in 2037, the main impact of the fund is to redirect private capital. I think that if the fund can accomplish that, so redirect the flow of private capital toward impact, toward outcomes, I think that will be a big accomplishment, because this is the biggest challenge, to redirect the private capital toward impact ventures and outcomes. So that's
I agree completely. The only thing I would add to that, just complementarily, is to say that I believe like what we want to really accomplish is embedding social value in the marketplace itself. Like we're changing the axioms of how capital flows and how markets operate. And that is truly systems change. It's transformational, and it will have we can't even imagine the impact that will have. It'll dwarf artificial intelligence, I'm sure.
And the closing plenary of the Social Finance Forum is called Money for Good. And I hope that this social finance fund, like you say, when you say embed social impact into the system, that's it, to build a system where money is used for good in every industry, in every investment, that it's not a universe and another separate universe. So that's the vision.
We want to mainstream it. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go bold and mainstream. So let's talk about the design of the fund. So there's a theoretical mismatch between the narrative of creating a marketplace and the fund design as a capital program with an expiry date. So how do you plan to provide ongoing support to develop the marketplace with the right infrastructure and resources to ensure longevity? Because we don't want a program, we want a way of life. We want a new system, a change of paradigm.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think we've thought a lot about that. And sustainability is built right into the design of the program, just like equity, a foundational commitment to equity and an equity lens is built right into the design of the program. So is sustainability. And we know that this work can't stop after 16 years. It has to continue. And we want it to be able to continue without necessarily having public investment be necessary in the future. And I think that's baked into the thinking behind the program. There's conditionally repayable contribution instrument, which sounds like a kind of a funny concept, but it's really been chosen to encourage wholesalers to build business models that could sustain the fund after the government funds exit. These agreements are perhaps longer than you'd normally see in terms of the contribution kind of agreements with the government. We normally do ones that are, sort of 4 or 5 years long maximum, and sometimes shorter than that. So this one's a lot longer. So there is more long-term thinking that had to go into it. Those government contributions include not just investment funding, but significant amounts for developing the market itself, which I think is really important to note. That includes activities like technical assistance, standardization of impact measurement, and awareness raising, because we know that we need to talk about this work in a way that everyday Canadians can understand, not just the social innovators that are, already drank the Kool-Aid and already really know what this stuff is about. We sometimes feel that we need to broaden the way in which we talk about it and make it more understandable for people. And that awareness raising is really important. Program activities will help to build a positive track record, providing valuable evidence to de-risk the marketplace over the long term, and facilitate investor confidence in providing capital to organizations and projects focusing on social and environmental outcomes. The Social Finance Fund also incentivizes fund managers to invest across the spectrum of organization and risk profiles, to maintain returns covering their ongoing costs. So that's important. They're not totally ignoring the financial bottom line, and that they're trying to make investments and diversify those investments in a way that gets them maintains returns that can cover those ongoing costs. That ensures that they will have sustainability in the future because they will be able to cover their ongoing costs. They're working, I know already, to build an investor pipeline that can continue once the government capital exits. There are also measures written into the agreements to support fund managers in converting a portion of any residual profits into legacy funds. And I think that may help to carry on their activities beyond the end date. Employment and Social Development Canada will continue to work closely with fund managers and the social innovation and social finance ecosystem to establish a plan for a seamless transition at the program completion, which is envisioned for 2039. So we're not backing out. We're a partner. We've co-created the process of developing the strategy was a co-creation working group that worked with the federal government, and we really see that partnership as essential to the sustainability of these efforts long term.
So you have mentioned social equity a few times since the beginning of the conversation. It's at the core of this fund. It's one of the foundation of this fund. But there are many questions and critiques on how social equity is embedded in how the fund supports social organization. There is not yet a shared understanding of social equity among the wholesalers and the intermediaries. So how are you going to respond to these questions from the social purpose organization? And I don't know if you would want to go to the root of the social equity lens quoting system that has been discussed, but there's really this question on how social equity is embedded and when will people share a common understanding of what social equity is.
It's a very good question, and I think we took extra time in the design and rollout of this to ensure that a social equity and inclusion lens was designed right into the social finance fund. I don't believe, social innovation is about social justice and equity for me. You cannot do that work without bringing that equity lens into the core of the work. Like, it has to be integrated into the core. I don't think we can claim to be addressing major societal outcomes without looking through that lens. That just doesn't make sense. So we need to ensure investments reach and support underrepresented groups and diverse equity deserving communities. Fund managers are integrating social equity considerations in all governance and investment decision-making processes, including the composition of their boards, advisory committees, and senior management. They're also expected to adhere to the 50-30 requirements, which was something the federal government created called the 50-30 challenge. That means 50% women or gender diverse people and 30% of other equity deserving groups in senior leadership is a requirement. Fund managers are expected to allocate a minimum of 35% of their investments into initiatives promoting greater social equity, including 15% into initiatives promoting greater gender equity. Now, we've also consulted widely, and including through community engagement sessions, and are working on establishing meaningful criteria for what is considered a social equity lens investment and a gender lens investment. And for the Social Finance Fund, and through a pilot called the Pilot SELI coding system. And we'll have more to share about that soon. I think that's really important work that will hopefully ground a more common perception or set of definitions that will help us all speak the same language when we're talking about that, and feel assured that we're talking about the same thing. Throughout the program, disaggregated data as well will be collected to meaningfully assess the gaps and needs of equity deserving groups in the ecosystem. All of our partners recognize that there's a lot to learn, which I think is key. We can't, pretend that we know what that's going to look like ahead of time. I think we have to be committed to continuous improvement and learning all along the way. But what's exciting, I think, is the relationships are being developed The data we're collecting is going to be important. All of the work being done, it will give an opportunity to learn, to innovate, to adjust the program, to make it more relevant and more successful in achieving impact across all equity deserving groups and underrepresented groups. And we're committed to promote that shift in practice and behavior and the redistribution of power within the Canadian social finance ecosystem. It needs to happen. We've heard for way too long that those who hold capital and power, decision-making power, are too homogenous, and it needs to be more diverse and inclusive and representative of the Canadian population. And I think that's something that's core to the mission of the Social Finance Fund.
Yeah, I think that the ultimate proof of social equity is the redistribution of power. I mean, if you don't have power, I mean, this social equity is more like a theoretical a view of the esprit, something that's not real. So I guess the redistribution of power. And just to make sure, this pilot project for a coding system, are we talking about a few weeks, a few months? I mean, people, I know it will circulate and people will be curious. So when are we talking about a launch date for this pilot coding system for social equity?
So I don't want to sound like one of those politicians who can't commit to a timeline, but I actually don't know when that's going to be done at this moment. So I would have to get back to you on that, Diane, but I'd be more than happy to look into that and make sure that stakeholders know the rough timeline, because I'm sure it has to be a little bit flexible, but I know it's difficult work. I've done that work in my past career, and so I could get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've been discussing that this social finance universe, this impact universe, should be horizontal. It's not a vertical thing that one group or one ministry holds. So let's talk about engagement from your peers. So many of Canada's biggest societal challenges are beyond the ministry of, beyond one ministry, whether any ministry it is. So how does the Social Finance Fund is connected with other ministry and the mandate of other ministry?
Well, that's a great question. I really feel strongly about this, as I know you do, and I'm sure others do, that all of the systemic, embedded, persistent social and environmental challenges we have in economic challenges are all, need and require a whole of government approach, but also in many ways a whole of society approach in lots of cases as well. And that's what we talk about in this space when we talk about systems change. But to your point, like, it has to be across the federal government. There has to be a recognition that the Social Finance Fund, through the deployment of this capital, is working with intermediaries in areas to achieve outcomes that relate to, housing and infrastructure, that relate to Indigenous Services Canada, that relate to Health Canada, that relate to innovation, science and industry.
Education.
Yeah. It literally goes across probably every department. So Environment and Climate Change Canada, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and many others. So we recognize that. I think it's taken some time to have the government recognize that. The Social Finance Fund was designed in a way to be non-prescriptive in terms of the nature of the socioeconomic challenges it would seek to address. So it's sort of agnostic. It can develop and address multiple challenges, and challenges may change throughout the next 16 years. It was not designed to solve any one persistent issue on its own, but to offer an additional sustainable source of private sector support to help bolster the suite of federal, provincial, and municipal government initiatives aimed at tackling them. And I see it really as could be very much leading the way. From my perspective, this is how as I was advocating for the launch of the Social Finance Fund, it's one of the reasons I put my name on a ballot, as you know, and got involved in federal politics. And part of how I pitched it to my colleagues in Parliament was that this Social Finance Fund would help mobilize capital to both support innovators and entrepreneurs and social purpose organizations, but that it would also help achieve the various government objectives across the different ministries. And I think many of my colleagues could see through examples, mostly because you need some actual on the ground examples to be able to illustrate this and have people, the light bulbs go on, but that really resonated with people when they saw how, things that are being done in Quebec on childcare could lead the way in Canada and be scaled up across the country. Or we see housing work that's being done in BC, which is truly remarkable. Or, an Indigenous community that I worked with that started their own grocery store in northern Alberta. Like those innovations and scalable models, I think most people across government can see the opportunity for enhanced impact in areas that we know the public cares about and that politicians are debating and wanting to see progress on. And so I think those things really appeal. I really do see the government of Canada as recognizing the Social Finance Fund. How we continue to ensure that value is recognized, I think, is an ongoing process, and it will have to be like part of my role, and what I'm passionate about is to make sure that people recognize that and continue to support that effort, and that we continue to raise awareness and shine a light on the real examples that are making impact as a result of this.
I think that it is a challenge to show that social finance is agnostic, that it's not linked to any industry, any project, that it's something that's really across the board and that should be in every different sector, because there are societal challenges in every ministry and in every industry. But I feel in your words that it's something to be reminded all the time, that it is it's a horizontal financial instrument. It's not a vertical instrument. Let's talk about the investors, because they're an important part of the story. Like we said earlier, it's a 2-for-1 model. Social finance fund want to mobilize private capital. So how are they being engaged to create leverage in the fund?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think engagement with investors by the government will be slightly limited, but that they will be directing the funds and the fund managers themselves, like they're doing the work. The government will not play an active role in the investment activities. That role now belongs to the fund managers. But with that said, their work will be monitored and they will be supported along the way to make sure that they help build an inclusive, thriving, and sustainable social finance market. Fund managers, I know, already have existing and extensive networks, and those will grow over time as they build, I think, a pipeline spanning the breadth of the financial sector. And I know that there's a lot of work to do on that, but weaving those networks is really what I envision is their sort of core work. We're not, going to necessarily be at the heart of that as a government. We're sort of understanding that that's the role of the fund managers and the intermediaries in the social finance marketplace as it develops. Those relationships are naturally going to build. I think what we're doing is trying to support those enabling conditions to make sure that can happen on its own, so that there's kind of an organic development to the marketplace.
So our conversation is coming to an end, but I've got one last question. We know that social finance needs champions. You know about that. You've been a champion of social finance, and it will develop and grow only if there are champions, especially political ones. So how will the Prime Minister continue to support this work, your work, the work of the Social Finance Fund?
Well, it's funny that you should say that. Every time I see the Prime Minister, he said, "Ryan, I was thinking about you because I was in this community somewhere in Canada," and that he had talked to a social entrepreneur. And he said, to me just the other day, of how inspired he is every time he talks to a social entrepreneur. I had one from my riding come to the Hill, Parliament Hill, this week, and just remarkable to see the Prime Minister's support for this work from day one. I've had no challenges in engaging our Prime Minister. in really engaging in this work, and he understands it quite well, which you wouldn't expect because it's kind of complex sometimes to explain. But and he's always supported me and come to the Sustainable Finance Forum that I've organized in Ottawa every time, and made speeches and stayed to listen. And so I think he's really inspired by this, to be honest with you. I know he has a real love for supporting young people, and I think there's something to be said for the innovation, the spark of innovation, really inspiring young people and engaging young people. I think the Prime Minister feels that too in this work. I know that this work is transformational, and I think he agrees. We've seen him time and time again help in terms of push for this work to continue moving forward. I don't think that's ever going to change, because I think he recognizes too what we're trying to do is mobilize capital, redirect those flows of capital to people that otherwise might not have had access to that capital, and that those innovators and entrepreneurs and change makers and social purpose organizations are the ones that are truly representing the best of what Canada has to offer, the most resilient, compassionate leaders in our communities that are trying to solve the toughest challenges that our country faces. And to me, if we don't elevate and lift up those people and find ways to give them the resources to lead the way, that really is the future of this country. And I know the Prime Minister believes that. I've seen the tears sort of well up in his eyes when I talk about it, because I'm so passionate about it. And I think he really shares that drive and that vision. Our core message right now, or has been for a while, is fairness for every generation. Before that, it was an economy that works for everyone. When you think of those messages, they really are very consistent with what I think the Social Finance Fund and the social innovation, social finance ecosystem is about. So I don't see any downside risk of the Prime Minister backing out, or Minister Suds for that matter, or any of our other ministers. Our cabinet and caucus is wholly behind this work. And so we look forward to just continuing to engage in this work and promote it, and really partner, because it's about a partnership, and it's about working collectively. And I know we've got lots more work to do. We're just kind of at the beginning phase of the Social Finance Fund, but it's very exciting to see what the future will bring with the tools like the Social Finance Fund. So thanks very much, Diane. It's really great. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's a pleasure to get to talk about the Social Finance Fund. I know the work of Future of Good is remarkable, and really want to thank everybody for attending.
Well, you know what? In conclusion, I would say that the Prime Minister posture about Social Finance Fund is the same as investors. If we can get investors to go underground, to see social impact projects, to see social entrepreneurs, to meet change makers, that's when they make the pledge to invest, to do impact investment. It's really underground that the spark starts. I mean, as far as when we talk about social finance, it's something very abstract. Then when you meet those project people, those change makers, then after that, they see why the money needs to be redirected. So it's interesting to see how the posture of the Prime Minister is the same as those investors when we get them underground. So thank you so much for your time, Ryan. It's been a pleasure. And I'm inviting everybody to be able to talk with a change maker at some